Hello everyone. In this tutorial, I'm going to be creating a marble floor. It's going to be a tile marble floor, and all the files will be available on my Patreon. So anybody who is a Patreon will get these files and they can download them. So let's get started. So I'm using Blender 2.91 for this, but Blender 2.8 should have these nodes available too. In Blender 2.79, I believe some of the nodes are different, so some of them may not work, but yeah. So we're going to be using Eevee, so we're just going to go to Eevee here to preview it. And it's going to just compile the shaders, which will usually takes a few seconds. Okay, and once the it should appear. So Eevee should be fine for this. So let's open up the material editor and let's go here, shader editor, and okay, we're going to be using Principled, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a tile floor, so we need to actually scale this cube down in the Z-axis, so we're just going to do S and then Z and make it very, very narrow. Something like this is pretty good, I think. And then we can scale it. Make sure you only have this selected. And then let's say scale it by 6. Should be good, I think. Yeah. And we could go a little bit more. Let's do S2 again. Actually, that's too much. S1.5. That should be good. And then always Control A and then apply all your transforms to make sure the scale is applied so you don't get any weird distortions when you start adding in the material. So what we need to do now is we have to add in, we're going to try adding in a wave texture. I think this was a good one to use for the marble. We're going to be using marble first, and then we'll create the tiles. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to need the texture coordinate and the mapping node. Instead, you could just press this node, press Control T, but you need to make sure that you have your the node wrangler add-on enabled, which should be check marked right here. So we got this texture, and you can Control Shift to preview it. And distortion, let's turn that up. That's not looking bad. Let's turn the details all the way up. We need as much detail as possible. Detail scale, I'm not too sure about this. Let's just try bringing up the scale. And this doesn't look too bad. Let's see, what do we got? We got rings, band, and I think I want to add in some more randomness to this, so I'm going to add in noise texture, and then mix the two vectors into the input. So this is very simple. You just add in a mix shader, mix RGB, I'm sorry, and then plug the noise texture into the bottom. Make sure you use the color though. And scale up the noise texture. And then you can kind of mix it in. And it's using different coordinates basically. And of course the detail, the noise texture should be as high as possible. I think something like that is pretty good. Oh, and roughness. You want to turn this up a little bit. Something like that actually looks perfect, I think. So this is 13. Let's bring that down to roughness 0.74. Then this 0.127. And this is 20.4 for the scale. And yeah, that's the options. Just want to make sure you guys can see them. And now we need to duplicate this because we're going to be using a checker texture or a brick. We're actually going to be using the brick texture. And if we were to just apply the brick texture now, it wouldn't look correct because the whole wave or the what's it called, the marble texture would kind of be repeated in tiles, but it would kind of be like it's continuing, and we want it to be random per tile. So I'm going to show you how to do this. So we're going to actually just duplicate these nodes, these three, Shift D, and we're going to add in the mapping again to here, and then bring in this one to the bottom. But one thing we could do is we could just change something slightly and we'll get a totally different result. We can also mess around with the this value a little bit. You don't want to go too crazy. Just some randomness. Let's see, scale of this one. And maybe instead what we could do is we can actually duplicate this mapping node and we will give this one, these two, different coordinates to work with from here instead, our second mapping node. And one thing we'll do is we can give a random rotation to this too. So maybe we'll just rotate it slightly and that will give somewhat of a different result. Yeah, so now we're going to add in our brick texture, which is here, and now we got our color 1. I think this is how it should be. So let's view the brick texture, plug the vector into the generated, which should be fine. Scale it, but I want to make these look like cubes. So I want to bring down this squash value to, let's see, when does it look? Let's bring that to 1. Actually, I want to make that line up as best as possible here. Okay, maybe it's the offset. That's what it is. So this offset has to be 1, and this frequency just randomizes the patterns, it seems like. So let's go ahead and adjust some of these settings. So these bricks need to be 0.5 high too. So now we're getting tiles, and we can adjust the scale of this. Let's make it something like this. I think is pretty good. I'm actually looking at a reference, and I think it could be a little bit larger, the tiles. Something more like this is good. And I want to use these coordinates here as to define how to mix these two in. So it's a little hard to explain, but I'm going to make some of these dark and some of these white, and then I'm going to try to maybe bringing up frequency. I want to randomize these values as much as possible here. And what I could do is take the output of this brick texture into a color ramp, which I'm going to do, and then bring up the black values just a little bit, but also bring up the white values, but kind of dial it back a little bit, just so you have a large variety of colors. And now we can use a mix shader. Mix RGB. I always confuse that with the mix shader. I'm not sure why. Anyway, this should go into the factor. So you're using these two values, the dark values will go more towards one of these, and the lighter colors will go more towards another color, and that's how you can kind of get some randomness into your textures. So we're using that to drive the textures that it uses. So let's use one here, and now you see we're getting a very weird result. That's because we need to use let's use both factor inputs. And now you see, if you look closely, it's not so continuous anymore, and you could change one of these even more. And now you see you got your other tiles. It's a little bit too continuous here. You could just adjust that a little bit. And maybe a better idea would be to use a checker texture, because then it's really random. Then it's like every other one is, this might actually wind up working better. But of course we'll still need to put the mortar or the grout lines in, but we'll get that added in. Let's use the vector again for generated texture coordinates, and let's make one of them black, so it's fully only using one texture, and the other one white, so it's only using the other texture. This is going to work out better. Let's see, we want to make it even as this one as possible. And I'm just going to temporarily use a mix shader, mix RGB with the checker texture, just so I can kind of reference these and just see when they line up. Okay, that seems like it's pretty good. And now I don't need that, so I'm just gonna delete that, and that should be good. So now I'll use this, put it into the color ramp, and then use that to drive the mixing of the two shaders. So now nothing's continuous. All of it's random, and especially if you rotate the second one. So like for instance, I was going to do that. And you can clearly see that it's got the seams, which is great. Let's see, I really want to make sure that... Okay, let's just add a little bit more randomness, maybe this direction a little bit, just so it looks a little more different. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted, and maybe for the top one we could do it in the other direction. Yeah, exactly. That looks great. And now what we could do is take this output, plug it right into the principled, and then we will bring down the roughness. Already it's not looking bad. There's a few things we still need to fix. So we need to take in our color ramp, and we need to bring the dark values up a little bit so that it's not so, so that the marble's not so dark, and maybe bring up the white values, and maybe make this a little bit, I'm not sure, I think that we'll just leave it grayscale. Make it a little darker, maybe a little bit less, narrower, possibly. And let's see, let's adjust some things here. Maybe bring up the scale to this to 20. This one just to a different value. And then just kind of tweaking things here to look a little bit better. I think I'm pretty happy with this overall. Yeah, let's just bring that back a little bit. That's good. And now what I want to do is I want to add in the grout, so we're just going to take our brick texture, which we should have already connected to the generated coordinate. And here you can see the whole node tree. So let's just Control Shift that and click that, and then all we will do is we'll make both tiles white so that when we multiply it, it doesn't affect the tile color, it just affects the grout. And then we can make the, let's see, we can adjust the size of it, watercolor. Let's make it, or this is the smoothing of it. Let's make it a little blurry so that it's not so harsh. And that we'll leave the brick height and brick width to the same values. And now we will take in again a mix RGB. Plug it right here, and then we will set that mode to multiply. And let's see what we get. Okay, and that's a little bit too blurry, so we're going to change that. We're going to make the mortar size a little smaller, 0.01, and maybe less blurred, maybe even smaller, 0.005. And I'm thinking something like that actually looks pretty good. A few more things I want to adjust. For instance, we can give this color of the molding, the grout, a slight color. So we can do something like, let's say, multiply no, we don't want to do that. Let's just duplicate that, and we got this, and we'll just invert this. So now the molding will actually, the grout will actually appear bright, and then we can multiply that by a brownish color. And you need to make sure that factor is turned all the way up. Actually, that's not going to work because then it's going to affect the tiles too. Okay, so we're going to have to set this up differently. So we're going to do this. We're going to leave the invert. And we're going to be using this as a mask again. And for more familiarity on mask, I covered it in my last course, but briefly I'll explain it. What it does is it basically allows you to define where a texture appears based on using another texture. So that's effectively what I'm doing here. So this white lines here, we can use that to basically define where we want the darker color to be. So we're going to be using that as a factor. Okay, and so you see that we're starting to get something, and this is too bright, so let's bring that down. Let's bring it down more, something like that. I think it should be more gray. I think something like that is ideal, actually. That's pretty good. Not so dark though. Maybe more just towards gray. That should be good. Yeah, that's good. And now what we could do is add in a bump node. This is very important, so we're going to add in bump, and let's just check all these settings to make everything look nicer in Eevee. So we're going to add in the bump node again. Plug that into the normal to the normal. Control Shift or Principal to kind of preview our material. And now let's just add in this shader to our bump as the height. And okay, so sometimes what you'll notice, and it happens pretty frequently, is that it's inverted. So let's just try, I think it's fine for this example, but if your tiles appear lower than the floor, sometimes you may have to invert it. And actually, it looks better when I click invert. So I'm just gonna make sure it's inverted. And let's just try changing these settings and see what we get here. Let's bring this down actually. 0.5 for each should be fine. That's good. And now we can also create a roughness map very easily just by taking color ramp from the multiply, and then we can kind of decide that this should be flipped and we want the designs themselves to be more rough. So we'll set that to be about, I don't know, say 0.4, and then the rest of it could be 0.1. Something like that is good for a roughness map. Actually looks a little too rough. So I'll bring this down all the way to 0.04 since I want it to be kind of glossy. And looking at this now, I think the roughness is too much. I mean, not the roughness, the bump. Let's just bring that down to 0.25. Can always turn on clear coat. But I don't think it's needed for this case. And yeah, I think that about covers it. Let's just preview through some of these viewport shading nodes to see these modes, to see how it looks in different lighting conditions. Looks pretty nice. And if we have the light enabled, we could like adjust this. Let's just make this an area light just to see how it looks. Let's go to like 10,000. Too strong now. Or I could just turn down the bloom amount. Or even disable it. But I think it's just too strong. Let's go to like 2,000. And make it a little bit more to the blue end. Yeah, that looks great. That looks very good. Yeah, so I'm gonna be including this this blend file on my Patreon. I hope this tutorial helped you guys. I'm going to be releasing a lot more content on procedural materials in the future. Thank you guys for watching, subscribe, and see you guys soon. Thank you guys for watching.